I'm very happy to start the panel today about women's economic empowerment, the panel by the Global Perspective Initiative, introducing four impressive women from Africa and Germany, from Nigeria and Germany actually, and our host, Ingrid Hamm, who is the co-founder and CEO of Global Perspectives, who will talk to us in a minute. But before we start, I'll just have some technical advice, and I would like to introduce our wonderful guests today. My name is Elizabeth Nier. I'm the director of the Hertie Foundation, which is one of the larger German private foundations, and I'm responsible for the sections for strengthening democracy, which is one of the two fields the Hertie Foundation works in. I'm very happy to introduce today from our panel Obi Ezek-Vesili. We'll switch to first names in a minute, but before that, I have to say that it's really an honor to have you here on our panel, Obi. I think it's the first time I interview somebody who has been called by the New York Times one of the 25 most important women worldwide. You've been subject to many stories, to name just a few, by also Time magazine. You are a former Nigerian presidential candidate. You've held several posts in the Nigerian cabinet. And just in case not everybody here in our audience is familiar with the inhabitants in a country like Nigeria, I just looked it up. It's 195 million people, which is as much as Germany, France, and Poland have in common. So it's really one of the largest growing countries worldwide. And it's very impressive to have you here. Also from Nigeria is Efenyinwa Oguchukwu, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, which is a foundation which works in 45 African countries, and its aim is to foster entrepreneurs. It was started by Tony Elumelu because he believed that the best way to strengthen growth in Africa and sustainable growth is to help young people who found companies, and also to start networks between young entrepreneurs and civil society governments and foster these networks. You've held different positions in your foundations, and today you are in charge for strategic decisions of all kinds, and also for networks to other organizations like ours, like the GPI today. And of course, one of the main focus of your work has also strengthening female entrepreneurs. And we're very happy to learn from you about that. Heike Bergmann is also an outstanding woman who has been a pioneer in her field in a way. Heike, you have a long-term contact with African countries because you grew up in Angola, as I learned before our talk, because your father did in the same way, held a similar position as you have today in a German company which worked for some time and he worked for some time in Angola. After studying in Germany, you have a double master in business administration and electrical engineering. You worked for different companies, one of them being Alstom, and for the last years you worked for Voith Hydro, Voith being one of the big machine engineering companies in Germany. And the last years you held this position of the Senior Vice President Sales in Africa. You travel a lot to many different African countries, Angola still being one of them, but not the only one. And you also hold an important position in the German Federation of German Industry, which is really in charge of dealing with African countries. That's a Sub-Saharan Africa initiative of German business, SAFRI. So very welcome, Heike Bergmann, as well. And last but not least, Silvana Kochmarin is somebody who I've known for many years because you used to be a politician for a long time ago in the German Liberal Party. But then you changed to move to Brussels and have served as an MP in the EP in the European Parliament, starting 2004 and from in the years 2009 until 2011. You've been the Vice President of the European Parliament. For a long time, you have been active in different kinds of women's affairs. You are the founder of the council. You serve on the board of the Council of Women World Leaders. That's a network of female prime ministers and presidents. And you're the founder of Women Political Leaders, which is a worldwide network of female politicians. And you have done a great job for many years now, bringing together female politicians holding high positions and really making a big and very influential network work. And the latest event has been that you held a big conference in Reykjavik. Welcome, Silvana. Thanks for joining this panel. And before we start our talk, I just would like to ask everybody who wants to point a question to use the Q&A function for that. And for technical advice, please use the chat function. There will be opportunity to ask questions after the first 45% maybe of our first 2/3 of our discussion. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can do that in person then, but you can also use the Q&A session. And Bernadette Facchetti from GPI will help me answer your questions later on. Thank you so far. Yeah, and the floor is yours, Ingrid.
Yes, thank you very much, Elizabeth, and a very warm welcome also from Global Perspectives. Ngozi, the former finance minister of Nigeria, I don't know why we say this in Nigeria all the time, but and nowadays she's running to become the head of the World Trade Organization. She once said, if you want to help Africa, do business here. And she was a great businesswoman by herself and a very, very strong and impressive personality. So from my visits to Africa, I can tell that I met quite a number of very, very impressive women, especially in the business sector. They are tough, they are successful, they are powerful. They keep up against all odds. We Germans sometimes feel really small when we meet such impressive personalities. So women are very important for business because women are those who stay and stay and stay and keep going. But of course, the coronavirus has hit everything and everybody, but it did hit the women more than others, and especially in the small and media business areas where you find a lot of women, that might be quite a problem. So this is not as an African special phenomenon. It's similar here in Europe. Women are carrying much more in this crisis than anybody else. So today what we want to do is we want to draw a balance. We want to see where we stay, what is the state of the art, how can we fill the losses we had throughout this year, and what can we do to empower women further on. Women empowerment is kind of a red line across our areas here at Global Perspectives. And that's because women are the best change agents, I said before, you can think of. And we need those change agents very urgently. So I'm very happy that today we have 6 or at least 5 of those women who changed a lot throughout their lives. And now I'm looking forward very much to the discussion. So please, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks Ingrid also for speaking so enthusiastic about this issue. That's how I've known you for many years. I think we're here in a critical situation because on the one hand, it has become more well known how much female entrepreneurship and the fact that more women join powerful positions has fostered development and how important that is. On the other hand, the corona crisis is threatening a lot of successes of the past. And so we are here to discuss options and what can be done not to hinder the progress that has been made in the past. So I'd like to start with you, Ify. If you, for a start, could give us an impression of to what effect the situation in Nigeria and also the work that you do with your foundation has been influenced or changed by the coronavirus. How would you describe the current situation? What has been working well? What are obstacles that you can handle, and what is really a long-term problem which we should look at more deeply?
First of all, I'd like to thank Global Perspectives for putting this laudable event together. It's a well-known fact that if you empower a woman, you empower a nation, and that the development of not just Africa, but the world depends on our investments and our empowerment of women across the globe. And so it is critical to really study the effects that coronavirus pandemic has had on women across Africa, and of course, the rest of the developing world. For us, what we've seen around Africa is that, of course, the small and medium enterprises is our primary focus, and we found that they do not have the shock absorbers that the larger companies have. Unfortunately, Africa seems to be the epicenter of the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Whilst we fared a lot better than the rest of the world health-wise, economically it's been devastating because there have been supply chain disruptions to business. I mean, if you think about the period of the lockdown and the small and medium enterprises that depend on our daily activity for income and for business, they were crippled. And so those months of loss of income has actually adversely affected the businesses. So what we're looking at is how can we rapidly ensure that we intervene and have a coronavirus or a pandemic, post-pandemic response, recovery response for Africans across the continent, especially women. We all know that in Africa, more than 70% of the workforce are women. Unfortunately, they earn less than 30% of the income and own a mere 10% of the property. And so it is absolutely critical at this point to make sure that women do not suffer more than their male counterparts. The Africa Development Bank, in its affirmative finance action for women in Africa, recognized a $42 billion gap in access to capital for women in Africa as compared to their male counterparts. And so this problem existed before the pandemic, but it's clear now that the pandemic has exacerbated the problem. And so we are working very furiously, and I think we have an announcement coming up very soon in conjunction with the European Union, an intervention that will shore up the access to capital for thousands of women across all 54 African countries. So this is just one of the many things that we're doing to make sure that women-owned businesses are able to stay alive, stay afloat, and continue to do business to see them through to the end of this pandemic. It is important that we do not lose the progress that we've made over the last 10 years with the emphasis on women entrepreneurs. So we're calling on all our partners, of which we have many, the United Development Bank, the UNDP, United Nations Development Program, Africa Development Bank, as well as the ICRC, to really, really scale the work that we're doing across Africa to empower young African women entrepreneurs. So just to let you know that the foundation has been committed to empowering women from 2010 when we started. In 2015, when we launched the largest private sector-led entrepreneurship program to empower, to train, fund, and mentor 10,000 African businesses across all 54 African countries, we committed to ensure that we do not have female participation less than 30%. I'm glad to say that today our female participation stands at 36%, but we are working furiously to get it up to 50%. And so capacity building and funding are absolutely critical to ensure that women businesses thrive on the African continent. It's a well-known fact that if you lend money to a woman, it's a 95% payback rate. And it said that the 5% who don't pay back are actually stopped on their way to the bank by their husbands. So women are reliable business. Not only are they reliable entrepreneurs, but they empower the family, they empower the community. And so we see the direct and indirect jobs and the impact on the family and the community is multiplied when you empower women-owned businesses.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Effie, for not only addressing the problem, but also talking already about a solution and options how to overcome at least part of the crisis. I think we'll get back to that later. But before that, I'd like to ask Obi, we heard something now about the business world and the aspect of investments, but from your vast experience, what are the other possible connections between the development of economies and the participation of women? And I think there are more aspects than that, than the role of women in as entrepreneurs. For instance, there's a connection with education and birth rates. There's a connection also with the climate or how you empower communities. So could you talk a little bit about that? What other aspects there are of the connection between the growth of economies and the role women play in it? I cannot hear you. Maybe you have to unmute. Hello, Obi? Hello? Obi, I think you have to use the microphone to unmute.
No, I have unmuted myself.
All right, now we can hear you.
Yes, lovely. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. What a delight to be on the panel and to discuss this particular topic. I think that the first thing is to establish that, when we talk about women economic empowerment, we're talking about everything that raises access of women to income and asset. But not just that, everything that focuses on their control of the income and the asset as a way of being able to control many other aspects of their lives. And so, it's really the case that women economic empowerment is simply not an end unto itself. It really supports many multidimensional aspects of the necessity for women to have the full dignity of human life, to pursue the possibilities of greatness as much as the other gender that we have in the world. And so the first thing that I thought was necessary was to identify that there are certain institutional, cultural, and normative things, cultural norms that are barriers to the emergence of women as people dignified to take advantage of equality of opportunity that should be the basis of the development of the individual. And then, of course, the development of communities to which women belong, as well as the development, ultimately, of their society as a whole. And so these barriers are not just cultural and based on norms, but also there are legal ones that create an inhibition to the progress of women. So legal barriers, when you look at some of the things we say in terms of land rights and even access to financial services, sometimes, legally, women are legally excluded from things like that. You look at some of the problems that women have in terms of the technology divide. Right now we are in a world of technology, but I looked at data recently and it says that we are sort of transporting the divide between the traditional economy into the global economy. The global economy is going to grow by 25% our current GDP in the world. And yet it's only less than 25% of women that are managers within that space. So already we have a disparity. So when you look at all of these, you then see that they all tie together in the fact that maybe the world hasn't yet made peace with the fact that the opportunity for our global prosperity to continue to grow uninhibited is actually in bringing women fully into the activities of humanity. Every aspect of human activity requires a woman to be part of it. The issue of gender disparity should worry all of us because gender exclusion is a cost to all of us. So to that extent, therefore, the things that Ife was saying about entrepreneurship is so important because one of the things that we see through economic evidence is that when women are economically empowered, they have a tendency to find their voice. They begin to have a political significance. They actually begin to matter in the decision-making process. And we know that, if you are not at the seat, if you're not at the table where decisions are made, it is unlikely that the issues that matter to you would be priority issues. And that's why the work that Silvana does through the Women Political Leadership platform is so important. So far, we have just about less than 10% of female leaders in the entire world. That's not acceptable. We should have much more than that. You look at you look at parliaments around the world, we have an average of 25% of women that are in parliaments. In some of the parliaments, you can't even find a woman. That shouldn't be the case. On our continent, Africa, the continent-wide average is 25%. In my country, it's a miserable 6 to 7%. It just tells you that we've got a long journey ahead of us. Now, why is it important that we should connect political representation to economic empowerment of women? It is important because, the extent to which the economy of countries grow is dependent on the maximization of all the skills and talents in that economy. And so if the women are left in low productivity activities, it means that that economy would not maximize its potentials. And so it is crucial that we should bear in mind that when women are part of the political decision process, then they can put forward the things that matter to children, the things that matter to young people, the things that matter to women, which often are missing on the agenda when it's all men stashed up in their black suits, sitting around the table and making those decisions. That's why we must change the world quickly.
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. Obi, thank you very much. And talking about parliaments, I think I should switch to Silvana, who's been, you're one of the, you're a person who knows women worldwide and women in power worldwide, and also, a lot of initiatives that have been taken for empowering women in parliaments and governments and so forth. And you've been in politics yourself for a while. And I think I seem to remember that you too have lived in Africa while being a child, right? I seem to remember you've lived in Morocco, but that's long ago, I think. Is that right?
Well, indeed, in Morocco and in Sudan.
Ah, okay. Maybe we come back to that later. For the time being, I'd like to ask you, because you know better than many other people, the differences between what worked in different countries and what didn't. There are so many different aspects to this topic, and in which way strong women can empower economies. One of the aspects that are mentioned often in German debates is the aspect of diversity, that bringing together different talents in companies or even in government can bring better results. So if you try to focus on maybe one or two aspects in this really wild subject from what you've seen, is there a stronger recommendation that you would make initiatives for women in the economy, from what you can say, has either worked in countries that really impressed you, or an initiative that we should look at to, foster progress in that field?
Well, thank you, Elisabeth. It's a quite complicated question, because it's very difficult to compare countries in that way. If you look at Iceland and compare Iceland, let's say, to Nigeria, this comparison doesn't hold in terms of size of economy, in terms of geography, of political legacy. So I think one needs to factor in the differences in different places. But I think what is interesting about the women in leadership, be it economic or political, that there are certain perceptions, prejudices, assessments that are everywhere around the world, no matter in which country you are. And we have attempted to every year take stock of what is the perception of the suitability for leadership of a woman or a man across a multitude of sectors, including economic participation, including being a CEO or being a politician, being a general in the army, being a medical doctor. And what is striking to see that if we would, this is a study that's carried out by Kantar, which is an opinion polling and kind of a very renowned institution in that. If you would say, no matter if somebody is a woman or a man, then you would get to the figure 100. Then it would just be, are you the good person for the job? It doesn't matter, woman, man. I don't care. Across the G7, we are at 73 on this journey to 100. We have this year, for the first time, been able to include Kenya and Nigeria as two very important African economies. And what Obi just described in terms of the situation in Nigeria is also echoed in this perception that in Kenya we are at 55 on this journey to 100, and in Nigeria we're at 47. So what does this mean? This means that there are a lot of prejudices towards women being strong, towards women playing an important role. And this is happening, and Germany isn't much better than Nigeria. Germany is almost the worst in the G7 countries. And I guess the participants in this discussion are not exactly surprised about this. But what one recommendation would be, and Obi already referenced to it, in order to have women be strong, we need to stop treating women differently. In other words, we should just get rid of laws that discriminate against women. And the World Bank does a mighty job every year to look at the legislation of all countries around the world. And it's less than 10 countries that don't discriminate against women in their laws. And this is about property rights, inheritance rights, a right to have to kind of a fair share after divorce, but also that violence against women is a criminal act. So there is a lot to do just by removing things that are an extra burden and an extra difficulty for women put in place by laws. And I would say and we actually did a study with Harvard and the World Bank, which shows a very clear correlation on how many women are there as legislators and how does the country kind of maintain these kind of laws. And there is a correlation of removing those laws. So elect more women, remove laws that discriminate against women. This would be my recommendation.
Yes, it's quite tempting to carry on with the subject and learning more about, among others, the German situation. But at this point, I would like to bring Heike into the discussion. Heike, you have the business perspective and you are traveled widely, you know different African countries, you know, of course, the German situation. And I think you can tell us something about what having a fair share of women in the workforce in which way that can be, what the positive aspects are for an employer. It's often heard, which I mentioned the aspect of diversity already, that having different talents in a company is a good idea, but also that the loyalty to an employer can be different by having female having more women in the company, and especially in high positions. So if you would just tell us a little bit about the experiences that you have made in your own company, in the Voigt company, but also what you have seen while working in different parts of the African continent. So what are your perceptions?
For me, it was an eye-opener when I was visiting actually Rwanda. Rwanda is a small country in Africa, but it has one of the most promising ways to go forward and to support women in leadership roles. Kagame is is a very strong leader, but he saw that enabling women in strong positions helped to create prosperity. And you can see it that Rwanda was always a growing country and is developing with more than 7% growth last year, GDP. They have, and what is the really key part in politics, 64% are women in the House of Commons, 50% of the judges at the Supreme Court are women, and also in industry, he's promoting strongly women. And you can see that this country is one of the very, let's say, highlights in Africa, developing from a real crisis to a very, very prosperous, interesting country. If I take that now to us as a company in Germany, I mean, in Germany or in Europe, you see more and more that diversity is a key issue, and all companies are developing in that structure. One must say, again, why do I underline that education is so important and that women go in all fields of education? I can see it a little bit in my field, because in mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, we're still at a very low rate. 20% only of the technical education are women participating, only 20% in that field. And this is also impacting these companies, because then there is a lower part of women working in that technical electrical field. And what I can see, a lot of power is going in that field in the industry in Germany. So, and I think why are we not participating so strongly in that segment, in that business segment, is because this field was never tackled by women starting already at the education. And that is a little bit there where I would go back to Africa and say how to enable stronger, also as a company in Africa, that we're having our European standards, and this sustainability aspect we're also implementing in the local countries. Like in Angola, we're planning to have an education center there. And for me, it is very important to have also a kind of quota on women. So it will be a technical education center. So it will be for mechanical engineering, for hydropower. But there we also have to have a focus to train women. That is one thing. And what I, through my last 5 years working in Africa, before I was only living in Africa, I must say, I have 4 or 5 women hired in the small group I'm developing directly in Africa. And I can see, as you said, the loyalty and the support for companies is with women very strong. And I can only recommend management to focus on that, because women are very dedicated and they have a higher loyalty.
Thank you very much, Heike. I think I've personally learned already quite a lot in the first round about both, the vulnerability of the African economy at this situation. A lot of people say that African countries have done fairly well in the Corona crisis, but I find it's also very important to know that the extent to which small businesses especially are hurt in this situation, and that there are a lot of problems, especially in companies, in small companies, in the service sector where quite a few women are employed. But I also found it quite interesting what you said, Silvana, about the role of women in the amount of discrimination in laws, and what you said about the situation in companies, and also the aspect that maybe what you said, Obi, that you may not even need so many reasons, so many facts about the economic impact of women in a society, as the whole issue is also about dignity and giving people a fair share of power and options to develop. So I think there are quite a lot of different and very important and interesting aspects on the table already. I would like to carry on, Effie, with asking you, you mentioned the access to capital as one of the key factors in driving economic development in the future. Who is in charge of that, or who would you like to address to support that? Is that an issue for companies, or is that an issue for international organizations? Who should act in that field right now?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I think that is a very key question. And, it is an old saying from a sage comes to me, which goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so it would be impossible for me to say it's either government's responsibility or private organizations or development organizations. It's our collective responsibility. It's a collaborative effort. And so that is why, at the Father Tony Elumelu Foundation, we continuously advocate the principle of Afri-capitalism. And Afri-capitalism was coined by our founder, Mr. Tony Elumelu. And it is the economic philosophy that states that Africa's private sector will be the driver for economic development in Africa. But of course, working in conjunction and in collaboration with governments and our development partners. And that is epitomized in the foundation and the work that we do. Because when we launched the program in 2015, the first year, 2015, we had just over 20,000 applications to the program. And at that time, it was about 25% female. Fast forward to 2019, last year. Last year, we had over 216,000 applications to a program that is set to empower just 1,000 people. And so with the 1,000 that the foundation committed to train, mentor, and fund, with a $5,000 non-returnable seed capital, you can see that we are barely scratching the surface. It's less than 1% of those who apply, of which 35% of them are women. And that is why we then opened the Foundation's entrepreneurship program up to partners. And so thankfully last year, as opposed to 1,000, we actually empowered a total of 5,000 African entrepreneurs across all 54 African countries. And that's because the likes of the United Nations Development Program, Africa Development Bank, as well as African governments. We had the governments of Benin, the governments of Botswana participate because they know and they see that Africa's burgeoning youth population needs to have a job-creating mentality and not a job-seeking mentality. And that is why entrepreneurs are the key. Already, 90% of the jobs in Africa is created by the SMEs. So we know that the SMEs are the key to Africa's development, the key to poverty alleviation. And so we must empower the SMEs. And everyone is clear that over 80% of women in Africa are small and medium business owners. And so they are the primary focus. With the COVID pandemic, like we said earlier, they have been adversely affected apart from, you know, the hit that the business has taken and the liquidity crisis, you now have women who for months on end had to juggle being a mom, being a teacher, and also running their business. And so the situation at home is now more than ever spilling into the workplace. So it's now more than ever that we need to ensure that we are protecting the woman, especially with the increase in domestic violence across Africa, with the, you know, during the lockdown, people being in close proximity. We need to protect the woman ever more. In countries like Sierra Leone, when the girl child was out of school, there was an increase in pregnancy. So we, like most of the speakers have already said, it's not a one size fits all. We need to have a holistic approach, and an empowered woman, a woman who has the finances to start a business and run a business, will create the environment that she needs to thrive and that her children need to be protected. And that is why it is critical that all players, public sector, private sector, governments, development organizations come together to ensure that the liquidity is given. And we deal at the foundation at the bottom of the pyramid. So we work with entrepreneurs who are starting their journey. They are not attracted to banks or venture capitalist organizations. And this is where majority of the need is in Africa. So we must look at creative financing solutions. We must look at blended finance. It's not just debt. We must look at equity. We must look at grants, because at that early stage, what you need is a grant. You don't want to be bogged down by debt, and you're not in a position to offer anyone equity. So if we start them off on their journey with grants, then we can ensure that they are de-risked and then are able to apply to banks and VCs for the much needed equity or debt to grow their businesses. So it's a multi-pronged approach, it's a holistic approach, and it's an approach that has to be collaborative, all hands on deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. There are already the first questions coming up, but I think at this stage we just have to talk briefly maybe about schools, Obi, because that's something I think that's common knowledge that the access to schools or to education, you could also say, of for girls and or young women is critical to the for participation in equal rights of women, and also for the development of economies. So maybe you can give us a little impression of the situation in Nigeria right now. I mean, in Germany, we have schools are trying to deliver their education digitally, which may not work well in Africa, I guess, to the same extent. So what do you think how the whole education system is doing right now, and what the perspectives are? How badly is it struck by the COVID pandemic at the situation, and how optimistic can we be for progress soon?
We already had a problem in terms of the disparity between girls in school and boys in school, even before COVID-19. So, in a place like northern Nigeria, for every 4 boys in school, you would have 1 girl in school. For the wider national average, you would have for every 3 boys in school, 1 girl in school. That means that we need to work very hard to ensure that we close the gap, because we do know that it is the productivity gap that particularly damns the fate of women in terms of their contribution to the society's growth and their own personal growth and expansion. And we know that education, human capital, being able to ensure that people have access to learning opportunities and that they do actually learn something. Because one of the things that we have seen is that while trying to achieve universal basic education access to everyone, we end up in a situation where people are really not learning that much. In some of the countries in Africa, as much as 3 out of every 4 children who go into the school system come out without having foundational literacy and numeracy. And that's really a problem because it means that the quality of learning, the quality of education is too low. Now this is worsened by the COVID-19. With COVID-19, there was a complete disruption of the educational system. And even though we have not had significant health impact of COVID-19, it has disrupted economic income of many families. And so many families are struggling to send children back to school. In my other life, another aspect of my current life is that I am the wife of a pastor. So, so we've got congregation in church, and we've got congregation that represent all segments of society. And I know that it is quite tortuous right now for families. We're having to find a protective the social protection as a way of supporting and aiding families so that children don't drop out of school. One of my favorite stories for this year was a woman who called my husband, her pastor, crying so badly because one of her two children was not able to go to school. And so this girl took ill. She said, I am sick, Mom, because I can't go to school. And so the mom calls wailing and saying, I need support for this girl to go to school. When we put the support together and the young child went back to school, the mother who called to tell us that her daughter was now well was a woman so happy. I mean, the joy in her voice is all you need to capture for people to understand that mothers are important in the equation of building societies. Imagine, this woman was persistent in ensuring that she got support for her girl to go back to school. This girl wanted to go back to school. And at the end of the day, it's not just to the advantage of that family, it is to the advantage of the wider society that she should go to school. The fact that her mother was her advocate for going back to school is also something that reminds us that, and I think if he mentioned that a bit, that for every woman, 70% of their income would go to things that affect the household. So education of their children, health of their children, so that invariably, if we want to achieve the SDGs quickly, we must pay attention to women. We can't achieve the goals that have been set out, the 17 goals of the SDGs, without making women the center of conversation on how our policies, on how our investments, on how our institutions can collaborate together, work together in harmony, and how public sector, private sector, and civil society, that is the communities, can work together to foster a good integration of women into the important leverage points that change the dynamics of economic growth of society. The health of society, the cohesion of society, the prosperity of society, and above all, the stability of society is dependent on ensuring that women have all the opportunities that they can have. And finally, Elizabeth, if you took it to a broader level, what we see now is that it is actually on the education pillar that the disparity has closed the most. So we have just about 4% divide to go in the disparity according to World Economic Forum gender report for 2020. But when you look at economic opportunity, economic participation and opportunity, it says that it's going to take us about 257 years to achieve that. Do you guys want our daughters, granddaughters, and our great-granddaughters to wonder what kind of women we were, that we left the world for them where it would take about 2 centuries and a half to get to the place of equality of participation and opportunity with their male counterparts? I don't want them to find our grave and spit on it. So we must work hard. We must push as much as possible until we can reduce this time, and the gap.
Okay, thank you. Let's ask Silvana what a good way might be to push that issue forward. Silvana, there are a lot of reasons why it's in the European self-interest to foster growth in Africa. The whole issue of migration is one aspect. The whole issue that African countries are also a big market, that it's a growing continent and part of the African workforce might also be interesting for aging countries in Europe. There's so many aspects and many reasons why we should be interested in the growth and sustainable development. If you had to design a program which supports growth in African countries, especially with the aspect for women, what would be like the most important thing that would have to be part of that program? Framing it also to be in the self-interest of the countries who finance it. What would you address and how would you frame it?
Well, I think you've got always the really difficult questions from me.
I know. There's a compliment in that because you're a former politician. So I think you know how to design programs. I don't know, but let me try. I want to echo what Heike said. In 2018, spent a good month in Rwanda and was deeply impressed by how challenges were turned around into a very ambitious policies, and that which leads, I think, to advance for your question. In the absence of the infrastructure that we have in Europe, the need to go digital and the possibility to do this digital leapfrogging, basically leaping over a lot of infrastructure that needs a lot of building, a lot of time and investments, going digital faster because the need is there, and also the advantages that come from this interconnectivity could be both helping development of entrepreneurs in Africa, could do anywhere really, but also would be in the self-interest of an African country, and also helping women in many ways. And for what Obi and also if you mentioned earlier, is that we have to move away from making this a women's issue, because it really is an economic. Everybody benefits from the fact when a woman is an entrepreneur, when a woman is strong, when a woman is healthy, when women create jobs, when women run businesses. It's good not just for women, it's good for everybody. And the reasons and the arguments have been given times and times again. There's been figures put to it. And it's really, I mean, one just has to ask oneself, what is keeping us from doing it? So this digital leapfrogging, turning maybe a disadvantage into kind of a competitive advantage, specifically in African countries, I think it could be one element that would lead to a solution. Another one, if I can just add this tiny bit, I think public procurement. So if or procurement rules in general, if we would say, both in terms of public procurement, but also larger companies, that in order to get a certain job, to get a certain contract, to get a certain financial commitment, you need to show that in your workforce, you have to have a significant number of women. Only then will you get this assignment. This could also be an incentive. This can be done on all levels. It just needs to be part of a thinking. And again, the arguments of why more diverse teams are better performing are all there. It just needs to happen that this is put in place.
Can I just add a tiny bit to what Silvana said, but because those are really powerful points that she made. And so on this second point about improving the opportunities for women in public procurement, it's actually evidence-based. It is shown clearly that the percentage of women winning public contracts across the world is actually less than 2% of global contract opportunities. That's woeful. So there has to be a deliberate effort for national systems as well as global systems to begin to look at contracting from the perspective of women participation. Some of the countries are designating a certain percentage of contracts that must go to competent women-owned businesses for their participation to begin to grow. So beyond, the women who make up your company, it's also about outsourcing of packages of public contracts to women, especially growing their capacity in a way over time. I can speak to this because I reformed the public procurement of my country and, worked on the legislation for it. And so I made sure that the issue of women participation in public contract has a provision within it. And then the second point, the other point she made on digital opportunity, digitization as a way of linking women up into economic participation. That's such a brilliant point, especially for the continent. You know why? The most important asset of the African woman today is not a car. It's not even a house. It's a mobile phone. With the mobile phone, the African woman has her connection to the world. The world could be her oyster, and that means a lot for them. So we need to think beyond just phone as a means of communication, to see it for the African women as the tool for financial inclusion, as the tool for connecting to markets, as the tool for getting educational information, even as a tool for political literacy, to find their voice as active citizens. So Silvana, you made very strong points.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I would also like to add, Silvana, because it's difficult to answer that question. Something that's also important is also the aspect of role models. If you say that in many societies there's not such a big acceptance of women being strong and seen as leaders and so forth, it's of course very helpful to give women who are in important positions more visibility. And I understand that that's what your organization is doing. So in a way, you are all working on different aspects already. And just before, listening to some of the questions that our audience has posted in the meantime, I would like to use the opportunity to ask Heike, because you work with governments a lot. That's what Void is doing, building, for instance, a lot of infrastructure, having a lot of infrastructure products. So can you say how that would work in practice, or is it something that countries are doing already? Obi said that in Nigeria the laws have been changed, or the rules for procurement. What is you as someone who is really working in that field, how do you think about that?
Thank you. I would like to go back just one thing to Obi, because I think it is very important that we have to see also the opportunities of Africa. And Obi, you mentioned that mobile phone. I mean, today, Ghana, for example, has more mobile phone per inhabitants than Germany. And I've seen Africa often leapfrogging Europe in the sense of digital infrastructure. My internet connection is sometimes better in Angola than it is in Germany. And I've seen M-Pesa in Kenya before I had Apple Pay in Germany, just to say. So opportunities are there. And especially if we go forward in the new economic model, which COVID has now actually pushed forward, in the sense that deals and business is now done by people who are not sitting at the same space, and much more through digital tools. This could be enabling Africa and using the entrepreneurship, which I've seen in Nigeria, to bring it better to Europe, because we're now in the position to start to use it more. We're getting used to it. Believe me, you won't believe how conservative Germany still is in the sense of not being on home office, but COVID just changed it like that. So we have to use the opportunities. And seeing role models, I think it is very, very important to have role models, because public opinion is so dominant in setting the future of young women. We know so many studies that expectation and experience define what kind of role a woman wants to have in future. Meaning we have to show them, even in Germany, that electrical engineering and mechanical engineering is an important field where a woman can be strong, and it is still for women attractive because it's a communicative job. It is inspiring, it can be very creative, and don't only think about being in Germanistic or something like that, or in cultural. So I think that is important, how we present it to women. And coming to your point now, that how do I, as a German company, see improvements in Africa on the state side with procurement, having more women engaged? I must say, really, Nigeria and OBI has really stepped forward in doing that, because I don't see so many countries really being so aggressive and putting in laws that women are really participating in this kind of sense. And I think that is, again, coming back to Silvana saying that not every country is on the same state. I mean, Rwanda is in the gender gap report before Germany. So they're better than Germany. And if you take that, unfortunately, Nigeria is still quite way behind. But Italy is also not very far. It's on place 74 from all countries. So we also in Europe have a way to go. And I think it is demanding that we kind of strengthen women from education, slowly develop them up, and try to, at least what Silvana said, the real basic, and I don't see it, for example, in Kenya yet, to have a legal environment which really equalize everybody. And that is the first step you have to do next to education. And then we come to the, let's say, more sophisticated models we can use with quotas, or trying to be more on role models, to develop networking for women, promote women stronger, having sustainability targets for companies. These are all things which will enable countries to develop the needed change and really using the resource woman in future.
Yes, thank you, Heike. I think we have quite a list now already, what can be done. And thanks to all of you for being not only very strong and powerful and positive, but talking about opportunities and not only problems, which I think is very inspiring. At this stage, I would like to bring in our audience. Starting with a question to all of you joining us in this discussion. You could vote for one of 6 different answers to a question that I would like to read to you. And that is, in your opinion, which manifestation of women's economic inequality should be dealt with most urgently? We have, I think, 6 options, and if everybody who's listening us right now, crosses one of these field squares on the computer, and we just wait for a moment. Maybe we can. Maybe people can answer their questions and read it, and we do already start with the first question from the Q&A section. Would that be a good way to carry on?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. We have quite a few questions in the Q&A, and I would like to start with one question from Ms. Renate Baer, who is CEO of the Deutsche Stiftung Weltbevölkerung, and she had a very interesting question, particularly to Obi and Ifeimba. I will just read it out loud. How do you consider the role of decision-making power of women on private level, example, in regard to family planning or access to contraception for enhancing their economic opportunities? Is this a prerequisite or not? And is sufficient attention paid to these issues on local, national, and international level? To be the first question.
I'll defer to Ife.
Good thing I was on mute because I laughed very loudly. To be honest, I have to give you the African context of this. Family planning and access to contraception is not a very Africa-centric topic. I think that arena is left primarily to the family and to the individual. It's not something that has been debated in government or other circles. And I'm sure that is why my auntie, obviously, said she would differ to me on that. So I think that this is an issue that should be left to the family and to the individual. And I don't think government or private sector or civil society should determine to families and individuals what decisions or how to make decisions around this. So I think I'd leave it there. Also, just to say that it's in terms of the impact that has on a woman's role a woman's ability to thrive. I believe that African women have shown that it's not an impediment. Africa is the only continent getting younger. African women have been known to have quite a number of children, and it hasn't stopped them. You see in the rural areas, women with 10 kids, 12 kids are thriving and they have educated their 12 children, and their children have gone on to be amazing successes. So I don't see it as an impediment, and I think it's something that Africa in general has left to the individual. And
the things increasingly is that the more that we can educate women, the more they have the agency to make those reproductive rights choices. And I think that that's so important. So in a place like Niger, where I was directly involved in helping the government when I was VP at the World Bank, what we found was that through role modeling, through the engagement of the traditional community leaders, through more education of the women to delay marriage, we found that women got to the place where they could make really strong choices in terms of their reproductive rights. And it's important because when you look at the demographics, it's important that Africa should be able to have the kind of children, the sets of households that it can economically take care of. When more children are born without the capacity to train them, then you have serious problems within society. Inequality becomes even more acute. So it is definitely a topic. It is a topic that has its cultural context, and it is being able to know how to nuance the approach in the engagement, even at that community level, knowing the tools through which to do it, and enabling people to make those kinds of personal choices, as if he was saying, that is crucial. When you miss the boat, you can go overboard in the approach you take, and what you get is a backlash. And that's not what you want. You want to empower the women, not make them vulnerable to all kinds of abuse because of the approach that is taken in that conversation. I have found education to be the answer to all things.
Thank you very much to both of you. And maybe one more question, and then we will now still have to close. We only have a few minutes left. So there is one question from Nigeria, maybe also to Obi. One important topic when talking about women's empowerment is also resilience. This is one issue that we also find very important here at GPI. And there is a question, how can women's capacity of patience and tenacity help them to be real drivers of political and economic institutions and in leadership? And especially the question is directed at Obi, how to navigate as a woman in the murky waters of power brokerage in Nigeria. So maybe you have some advice for aspiring women leaders in Nigeria.
Find your sisters, find them. You know, we've got to use our number to good effect. You know, I mean, the sisterhood effect is so important. When you're tired, the other sisters lift you up and they hold your hands. You know, we're not connecting data very well. If women understand data, data would show us that we've got the numbers. We've got the numbers. We need to, you know, do more with our numbers. We need to understand our numbers, translate our numbers to real power. So don't ever walk alone. Find your sisters. When I ran for presidency, I have to tell you, the women were just there for me. There were times when I said to the coalition of women that were supporting my bid for presidency, I said, I don't even know which of us is running for office now, you know, because they were often more excited than I was, you know. When I'm getting tired, they say, come on, Obi, come on, we're going to do it, you know. So find your sisters, find them. And as you build the coalition, as you become formidable, just know that you must invest in the next generation of women. What I love the most is how my being, you know, finally beating my phobia for politics and going into it, just sort of awakened so many more younger women. I see them today, they say, I'm going to run for parliament, I'm going to run for governor, and I'm like, go for it, go for it. I'm so excited about the fact that, as you know, that whole concept of role modeling, it does work. So find your numbers, find your sisters, be a role model as much as possible, do mentoring, be totally available, approachable, support your next woman, you know, because the more that we can do that, the faster we're going to get to destination.
Thank you, Obi. What can you say after that? I think there's a lot of positive energy in the room here, even though I've only seen you all on the screen. But yeah, I think there's, I can only thank you at this stage and for really being such an impressive group. I learned that since role models are important, it's also important to have panels like that and more of that, I think. So Ingrid, I think that's what you have in mind. And maybe with your closing remarks, you can also say what the next sessions of this type will be. At this stage, I would like to thank everybody for being in this round. I learned a lot and I really enjoyed meeting you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, this was really encouraging. And if you are looking for some sisters, here they are, the best you can find. If I'm asked to sum up a bit, you know, if in the beginning you said, if you empower a woman, you empower a nation. So I think we should keep this in mind. And then it was about what framework we need. And of course, we need a legal environment that give women the choices to do what they really want to do. We need collaboration across all sections of the society. That was a very important point, to have collaboration, not just only to fight and be a victim, but to collaborate a lot. And only then we will overcome the discrimination. Silvana, you showed us that we are still quite apart from 100% non-prejudices, but in Germany, it means that 55% are still not on the right track, like Nigeria. And then of course, Obi had that one point everybody says, but she can really stay for it, and this is education, 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 because this only enables you to have your choices, and then you can make choices for what Heike insisted on, is that women can everything, electricity as well as I don't know, communications. We have to overcome that idea that women are that kind and not the other kind, and therefore we need role models. And all of you, of course, you are that kind of role models we are looking for. But nevertheless, don't forget, we also need the frame. And you mentioned Rwanda, Heike, that whatever you think about Kagame, but he built a frame that works, and that works successfully, especially also for women. So I think it was a great session tonight. You overwhelmed, I think, a lot of us, and extended our expectations. Yeah, looking forward to continue. And as you might not know, but this was the start of a series, a small series of 4 or 5 sessions that will follow throughout the next year. So financial inclusion will be one big topic, digital divide will be one big topic, and maybe we should include education too. You may look forward to 2021, and maybe sometime we will meet in person again. And then your role model qualities will work even more. So thanks a lot for tonight.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, everyone. It was lovely to see you all.
Yeah,
it was. Thank you so much.
It was a great pleasure.
And Ife, don't let it be on the screen like that I get to see you.
I know, never.
Okay.
I'll rectify that.
All right then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
I'd love to meet you in person.
Silvana.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye, Heki.
Wiedersehen, Silvana.
Bye, Ingrid. Bye, Elizabeth. You were a great moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
But it was great.
Great talking.
Thank you. Bye.